Commerce Committee, it's good to see everyone here today. Committee, we do have a hearing and then we plan on working 2 bills today. We will begin with the hearing on SCR 1620. I will open that hearing and we are going to have an overview from a special presenter today that I will let our reviser Charles Reimer introduce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd like to introduce the committee to Cale Drumright. He's one of our fellows, and he did indeed draft the resolution that's before you today for a hearing. That's authorized specifically by 123802, a concurrent resolution for a port authority. Any questions? I think Cale will defer to myself or obviously the conferees, but he will just make an initial presentation.
Welcome to Commerce, Cale. Good to have you here.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Concurrent Resolution 1620 approves the creation of a port authority in Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas, according to Chapter 12, Article 3402 of the Kansas Statutes Annotated. Creation of the Port Authority is to preserve, enhance, and improve the economic prosperity of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas. Please direct any further questions to Charles or Senator Haley.
Committee, what questions do we have? I think you did such a thorough job. We have no questions, so we will move to proponent testimony. And committee, we will start with Senator David Haley. Senator, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chair Erickson and Vice Chair Dietrich, and to our ranking ready, and to each of you, my colleagues. Thank you for having the hearing. I genuinely appreciate your making time in the schedule to hear this. Port Authority Resolution 1620. You have my written testimony, hopefully, regarding this. It's an interesting matter, a Port Authority. I didn't know much about it. During the time that I've been here, I've seen, I think, 4 of them implemented for several counties. This Port Authority existed in Wyandotte County at some point. We had a Port Authority, but it gave way, or they dismantled it, so we could build our GM plant, the General Motors plant. And so it was disbanded at that time so that we'd have the land for GM. We gave up our airport, or our airfield. KCK had an airfield, and it was regulated by the Port Authority as well. From what I understand, as an aside, the airfield was one of the longest and most successful in the region. A bit of a side, the Port Authority regulated that which would be Harry Darby, former U.S. Senator from Kansas, and his successes in helping the aircraft industry be successful in many world wars. That's an aside, but what I'm saying is the regulation in Kansas City, Kansas, or the implementation of a Port Authority saw great economic development and success for the area. It was disbanded again because of the need for the plant. The plant is wildly successful. We're glad that it was done. We're asking through the concurrent resolution 1620 that we allow, or that you would allow, Madam Chair and members, Wyandotte County to once again implement or to have another Port Authority. Since 1981, any Port Authority has to come through the legislature for approval. And as I mentioned, I remember being here when a few counties, let me look on here, remember, have come through. It doesn't happen very much, but as you'll see in the written testimony, Pittsburgh, Grant, Morton, Stanton, Stevens counties, and Stafford over the years, 2001, 2007, 2014, have come and successfully requested of the legislature that they be allowed to have a Port Authority. And usually these go through, or have gone through unanimously, because it is up to the local, of course, in concert, the local county to bring it into being. So I ask that you please allow the legislative initiative to go through to allow us to reinstate, Wyandotte County to reinstate a port authority for primarily some riverfront development that I'm hoping we'll see should that be passed, and ask that you favorably consider, if you will, please work the bill, Madam Chair, and pass it through, and I'll be happy to stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
I think that would be now. So committee, what questions do we have for Senator Reddy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony, Senator. I was wondering, what exactly does it mean to authorize to set up a port authority? What exactly is that? Does that give taxing authority? Is it a business district? Do they have elected members? What exactly is that?
Yes, they can, Madam Chair and Senator Reddy, all of the above. There will be a board, or there is a board, a Port Authority board that will be appointed. It can have and will have the prospect of a taxing authority for a certain entity, kind of like, I would hope it would be like a community improvement district area for the taxes to be applied if they were for a specific region or specific purpose. Oftentimes they interact with the rail. I'm learning a lot of this as we go along myself, but they often interact with rail as well, the change with rail, and it's not just riverfront. My interest, our interest is in that being the case with a board that would be appointed to enhance economic development opportunities along the river, or the gateway, if you will, to Kansas, coming into Wyandotte County.
Senator Reddy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you say, yes, they do have taxing authority and they will have an appointed board members, who is the taxing authority? Is it the county commissioners? Because would appointed board members have taxing authority? I would imagine that would come from elected officials.
So again, Madam Chair and Senator Reddy, I believe that it is the appointing authority that would have the taxing, and they're going to be appointed by the, if this is a point, they would be appointed by the commissioners, the Unified Government Commissioners. And the Unified Government Commissioners, of course, would have to affirm whatever project or whatever the Port Authority would have by way of its authority, but there would be those recommendations that would come back to the commission through the Port Authority, as other established boards exist inside of local governments that do their due diligence for certain projects and then come back and request that something be done.
Other questions? Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, Senator Haley. So this taxing authority, I'm assuming, and well, I better not say that, the local port authority would have the ability, if we grant them the power, to levy taxes and do local projects. They wouldn't have the authority, or would they have the authority? Would they be able to avoid any state tax or any federal tax by becoming a port authority? Or do you know the answer to that?
Madam Chair, Senator Schallenberger, I don't know the answer to that. If they would, or what impact their ability would be regarding our state or federal taxes.
I know that as I look beyond you, that there is an attorney who gave written testimony, and I don't know if it's inappropriate to see if there's more information that he might have.
And Senator, you very well might. I should share how grateful I am to the written testimony. Again, we learned that this would be heard yesterday about this a little bit earlier, and so we hurried up, and we appreciate having the hearing. So I do appreciate the expedient reply. We've also visited with the chamber. The attorney who's here represents our unified government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas. Mr. Davis does. But we've also visited with our Chamber of Commerce, and we're trying to get additional testimony and support as well. I don't have the answer to the question, and kind of want to cover a little bit for him because I don't know if he has the answer, but this is kind of new.
I'm going to ask our revisor or Kale, do you all know the answer to Senator Schallenberger's question?
So there is a provision in 123802 whereby the county can institute a property tax countywide or citywide that would go to support the Port Authority. And as far as and I'm certain that Mr. Davis can provide more detail, but the Port Authority has many advantages, and that includes, property acquired is exempt from taxation under certain circumstances. There are sales tax exemptions that apply to a Port Authority. So there are many economic development advantages that go with creating a Port Authority. And now I would note that the property tax that I mentioned in 123802 requires an election, requires approval by the electors of the county or city.
But as far as any federal income tax implications, are you aware of any?
So as far as federal, I am not, Mr. Davis may be, but as far as state, another benefit is that income that may be generated from properties that are acquired by the Port Authority are exempt from any state taxation. But as far as federal tax, I'm not aware. Now, the Port Authority can issue bonds, and those would be potentially exempt from federal taxation. But as far as other than that, I'm not aware of that, but perhaps Mr. Davis can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go Senator Dietrich, then Senator Reddy.
I'm sorry, I see that Kansas City, Missouri has a port authority. Is this going to be competing port authorities? You're kind of in the same general area.
Well, Madam Chair, Senator Dietrich, I would hope that we would be in the gateway to Kansas, coming from Kansas City, Missouri, that we would have something attractive that would be built along the riverfront. My hope in this is to have something that we would draw from that. For example, in the southern edge of my district right now along the river is a development called the Rock Island Bridge. And the bridge is an old bridge that spans from Missouri to Kansas, and there's some development going on now, and they're going to make shops and what have you and put it together. It's really become a pretty big deal. If this were to pass, I would hope the Port Authority would continue a north by northwest along the river enhancement, beautification, economic development along the river, maybe to augment some of the successes that downtown Kansas City, Missouri is seeing along its riverfront, but certainly a draw for some people who are already coming to KCMO because of our Port Authority in KCK.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Senator Reddy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it was referenced, I believe, by our revisor, there would be a vote on taxes. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
I believe he referenced property, if there was an increase on property tax, then it would be a vote of the people, yes.
Okay. So to have a couple of follow-up questions to that, Madam Chair. So if the public are voting on the property tax for this, is that, how is that done? Do they say we need to have $500,000 and they would vote on it, or is it we need to increase a mill or 2 mills? Is it based on the amount they need or by mills? Or is it just for the Port Authority or all of those residents in that county?
Senator Haley, would you like to defer to our revisor?
Indeed, because I don't know the answer, Madam Chair.
And if the committee will just give me a moment to read the relevant statute here. So the first statute I'm looking at really doesn't provide any detail, just requires that, that there be an election and also, you know, that it's citywide or countywide. So we're not just talking about a tax levy on the, within the Port Authority. We're talking about city or countywide levy. And actually, the jurisdiction of a Port Authority is the city or the county that, or both, that creates it. So I'll continue to look for further detail, but
One more question, if you don't mind, Madam Chair. So one more question, as far as whether maybe it's a couple requirements for Port Authority. Does that mean they just have to be next to a river? What are the requirements to be considered a Port Authority? Thank you.
Revisor Reimer.
actually, that's quite broad. So transportation infrastructure, yes, certainly. But also an industrial area. Now, there are certain requirements specifically with that. You know, the governing body has to, you know, sort of issue a statement when it makes the resolution or the ordinance creating the Port Authority that, you know, there is a public purpose for this, and one of the other requirements for a Port Authority is that there be an official plan for what it's, you know, going to be doing. It's fairly broad that, you know, for example, I think you heard from the testimony that there was a GM plant that was a Port Authority. So it can include, you know, an industrial type of project like that, as well as, you know, a port, an airport, you know, other kinds of what you would normally think transportation kinds of infrastructure or that kind of thing.
Other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, thank you so much, Senator, for being here and for your testimony.
Madam Chair and member, I'm grateful again for the hearing. Thank you. One little footnote I put. So 10 years ago this week, SCR 1620, creating the Stafford County, which is the wording for this Port Authority, came through transportation. But I thought it was ironic that the same number to the decade would be offered, and the language is almost identical to that. And I would hope that this SCR 10 years later, 1620, might be favorably passed at your convenience. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Committee, we do have written testimony, as was referenced, from Paul Davis on behalf of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas. Mr. Davis, you've been mentioned several times during this hearing, so I want to give you an opportunity if there was any question addressed to you that you would like to comment on.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Paul Davis on behalf of the Unified Government. To Senator Schallenberger's question, there's nothing to my knowledge that would allow them to avoid any type of federal or state taxation. Charles did mention that I think within the power of a Port Authority is to grant a sales tax exemption, and I think that's that certainly is something that they could do. The one thing I might add that I think has been discussed a little bit, and Charles mentioned, from my knowledge of Port Authorities, really the primary tool that most of them are utilizing is the bonding authority. And, you know, they certainly have the power to institute a mill levy to support the Port Authority, but to the best of my knowledge, it's the bonding authority that is oftentimes tied into development projects and things like that that they're looking for. And you know, Senator Haley mentioned the Rock Island Bridge, which was recently, so I can't remember if it was Wall Street Journal or something, that was 50 things in America that you need to go see. A really interesting and development project, but the UG is really looking at trying to utilize the riverfront from the Rock Island Bridge clear up to the Quindaro ruins. And you know, there's a big effort to try to make something of a tourist attraction of of Quindaro ruins, and so that is really where the Port Authority concept comes in. So, thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Committee, there were no neutral or opponent testimony, so we will close the hearing on SCR 1620. We will turn our attention to working a couple of bills. The first one we will look at is House Bill 2745, providing military spouses exemption from occupational licensing. Committee, this is the bill that we heard yesterday. Do we need an overview, or I'm happy to do that, but Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just had a quick question. I was looking at it. Is this all military or just U.S. military that would qualify?
I'm going to turn to our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, military service members is defined on page 2 of the bill. If you look at lines 5 through 8, it means a current member of any branch of the United States Armed Services, the United States Military Reserves, or National Guard of any state, or a former member with an honorable discharge.
Thank you. Okay. So anyone need an overview of the bill? Happy to do that, but we've all slept, but I think we're good to go. Yes, Senator Tyson.
You want a motion to move it out?
I do have an amendment, so if you would pass that out, Charles. Committee, I know that this looks like a substantial amendment. Hopefully it's not as complicated as it looks. But as I mentioned yesterday, the definition of an applicant and the definition of a military service member, there were some gaps in those definitions. So we wanted to make sure that the definition of an applicant for this mirrored the intent and language of a military service member on the next page. And so that's why we want to add in the language there where you'll see it needs to be a current military service member or spouse of a current military service member. And then we wanted to make sure on the definition from military service member on the following page that it included those with an honorable discharge. All we're basically doing is making sure that the definition of a military service member and the definition of an applicant are congruent. And if there are questions, I'll have Charles address that more, or if there's additional information. Charles, if you would like to address anything that I missed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to mention first that another thing this particular amendment does is expand the, it expands it from the amendment by the House. It doesn't expand it from the original version. But if you look at lines 27 on the first page, you'll see that an active is stricken. And that is because in this, and there's also another similar strike of active subsequently in the amendment, and that is because this amendment expands the exemption for military service member spouses, and I have to correct myself. This actually is an expansion of the original bill. It expands the exemption for military spouses to all military service members. So that would include not only active or current military service members and their spouses, but also former military service members with an honorable discharge and their spouses. And the reason Madam Chair referenced, trying to make this sort of in line with the definition of military service member. And so to kind of explain that, if the committee would turn to page 2, you'll see that I've highlighted some text there. And I've kind of double highlighted the last phrase. So you'll see that military service member, as I mentioned to Senator Tyson, includes both current members and also a former member with an honorable discharge. Now, the amendment made by the House, if you look on the first page, in bold, the bold print, so this is a definition for applicant, and this definition is very important because the benefits of this statute go to applicants. So military service member under the House version is someone who resides, the House added this, who resides or plans to reside in the state due to the assigned military station of the individual or the individual spouse. So then the issue is, well, does a former military member fall under that definition as amended by the House? And, you know, I'm sure there could be arguments either way, but for purpose of clarity, I think it's good to make sure that one way or another that's addressed. And this amendment addresses it in the following way. It adds, you'll see there, there's an A, military service member, you know, current, and the reason I put in current is just, it's a choice of words. It doesn't have any meaning. It just makes it, just uses the same language as the definition. So we have a current military service member or military spouse. We've got B, you'll see there in the red box, a former military service member with an honorable discharge or spouse of a former military service member with an honorable discharge. And that is just taken straight from the definition. If you look at the second page, look at the definition, we're just taking it straight from that. Who has established residency in the state or intends to establish residency in the state. And that, of course, is just repeating the language from the next category of applicant, which is an individual who has established or intends to establish residency in the state. So we're just using parallel language there because there was a concern that, well, you know, we don't want this open to, you know, folks who may be from out of state, and there was a concern to limit the benefits of this, both this bill and the underlying statute. So, so that's the first thing this amendment does is just make the definition on page 2 consistent with the definition of applicant, definition of military service member on page 2, consistent with the definition of applicant on page 1, in the context that we're not leaving out former members with an honorable discharge. There will not be an issue of whether or not former members are included within the definition of applicant. That's what we're trying to do. And then the other thing this amendment does is it expands the exemption from all fees for military spouses from just military spouses of a current military service member to a spouse, a military spouse of also a former military service member with an honorable discharge. And then there is, I think, one more change, and that's just a technical kind of change. And the other strike of active, you'll see on page 8. And, you know, page 7 and 8 is sort of the core of the bill, as I explained when I reviewed this. And so we're just striking that reference to active, so we're just referencing military service members, and military service members include former military service members with a less discharge, honorable discharge. So I hope that I've been able to explain what this does. And
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to adopt this amendment, just so if there's not a desire for this, then we don't have to waste our time on it. So I'm going to make that motion. Is there a second? Senator Schallenberger seconds. Additional questions or discussion on the amendment? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do have a couple of questions. The beginning of the bill, it states the act. What is this bill for? And it has in there providing that military spouses of active military service members. So my thinking is in the original intent of the bill is because military are usually they have a 2 or 3 year rotation, that this transitions them quickly into our community so they can have less pressure about going through all the fees and application process. So the timeline is shortened so that they can get into our workforce quicker before they rotate out again. To me, this extends it, when we say former military service member, that means it can be open to, I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of the original intent. That's my question. Does it defeat the purpose of the original intent if these former military service members are coming here and will probably stay here for more than 2 or 3 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question. My motivation in bringing this was not, and I understand your question with the purpose of the underlying bill. However, when you look at the definition of military service member, we would then have to strike those with an former with an honorable discharge. And I think that's not necessarily what the intent of this was, to not honor their service, even though they are not actively serving. So that was my motivation, is just make sure the applicant and that definition are the same, because I certainly would hope that we would include former members that were honorably discharged as a service member. So Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do somewhat agree with Senator Reddy. I thought we were just talking about active duty who do have to pick up and move regularly, and this will then help them with some of the processes that they're involved in. My question is, there's a fiscal note to this. So we only looked at active duty or the agencies that were involved in the licensing piece. I know of hundreds of people that are honorably discharged military members in Kansas and their spouses, maybe thousands, around the Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, Lansing, Manhattan, Junction City area. I'm just wondering, we have any thoughts on what that fiscal note might be, the expansion of that? And it's not disrespecting our honorably discharged folks. It's just there's some new criteria here, and I'm wondering if we have some issues with financially.
I don't believe we do. I know that when we talked about this, or I talked about this with the revisor and the people who originally brought this, is that the thought was that those people have probably, if they are going to be licensed and work in the state of Kansas, they probably have already gone through the licensing part for their respective profession, and therefore the impact would be minimal. Do we know that? We don't, but we're thinking if they've been here, they're living here, and they needed a professional license, they probably would have obtained it by now. So that was the thought with that. Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think there would have been a question without the amendment whether they already qualified, because the definition on page 2 of a military serviceman does include a former member, and on page 1 it says that they could avoid paying the fee. So I think the amendment, which is what we're on right now, actually clears it up better than if we didn't have the amendment.
Madam Chair.
Page 2 of the
Yes.
amendment, where it's highlighted. The definition of military serviceman also includes or former member with an honorable discharge.
That's the addition.
No,
No,
it's in the bill. That's the
I
original.
thought that, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Supervisor, can you-
we're going to let Charles clarify that.
Yeah, so that's a good point. If you look at the language on the first page, there in lines 11 to 14, it says a military spouse or military service member who, as amended by the House, who resides or plans to reside in the state due to the assigned military station of the individual spouse. So the issue is, does a former military service member fall within that definition as amended by the House? And the purpose of this amendment is to, one of the purposes of this amendment is to clarify that we're going to include former military service members. And we do that by adding B. You know, there would be other ways one could do that as well, but it's just clear that we're going to add them. And because, you know, when we're talking about planning to reside or residing in the state due to the assigned military station, well, you know, obviously that's going to apply to current military service members. A former military service member, you know, that may not be the basis of where that person resides. So that's how we're addressing that disconnect. Does that clarify things?
Yes, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. I did not, I thought when you said that you highlighted this, that it was new, but it didn't have the red bubble, so I'm thinking I'm missing something. So the chair showed me the original language that was in there. I understand. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, the intent is to make sure that definition of a military service member and applicant are crystal clear so that if someone goes, oh, but that's not what it says, you know, different, that those are the same, so there's no misunderstanding as to the consistency between applicant and service member. Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two things. One, not only does this honor our military service folk, it's actually, if we can find a way that works for the former military folk, they are a wonderful addition to our state economy. So there's a real advantage in that regard as well. There is one thing, though, on the how much is this going to cost us side of it. On, well, the second page of the fiscal note, it does say under the Board of Healing Arts, active duty. I didn't notice that under any of the other categories, but I'm just wanting to be sure that we aren't spending money we aren't aware of. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we would just have to make sure that we got an updated fiscal note, and we just have not had time to do that, so. Any other questions? Senator Ware.
Wondering if we have any guess as to the range of what that might be. I hate to jump on board of something that still has a question mark.
I'm sorry, Senator, we don't. To my knowledge, we do not. Again, the thought being that if we have existing military who have been here as residents and they needed a professional license, they probably have already obtained that, but can't say for certain that that's the case, but that was the thought. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, you know, so when we define military service members, I see where it says former is included, but the first word before that is active. So should we remove the word active? I think that's kind of what's kind of standing in my rationale. If we remove the word active and said that military spouses of military service member or military service members, but the word active, there isn't one that defines what is an active military service member.
Are you talking about on line 3?
Yes.
Of page 1?
Yes, that's
Charles?
because on page 2 it defines military service member on line 5, and line 6 says military spouse, but there's no indication to what is an active military service member. And if that, I think that kind of said, that's kind of what's being stuck in my head.
And I can see that, but if you look at B in the balloon, I think it clarifies a former, but I will let Charles, looks like he wants to address this. Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first reference there to active is in the title. That really has no application to the effect of the law. The meaning of active, you know, you'll notice in this bill that I've changed it to current, and that is just to reflect the language in the definition. You know, I think my thought on that is active or current mean the same thing in this context, and you know, I just changed it because just to be consistent. But I think that's a fairly, you know, word of fairly, you know, it's very common meaning. It's pretty understandable. I don't know that that needs a specific definition. Although, if the committee wants, we could certainly do that.
Committee, at this time, I'm going to withdraw my amendment. The last thing I want to do is muddy the waters on this and give people a reason to withdraw their support, because it's too important, I think, that we get, if it's going to cause confusion and cause people to fall off, that's the last thing I want. So I'm going to withdraw my amendment, and we will then just go to what is the will of the body on the bill. Do I have a motion on the bill? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually think your amendment clarified the bill, because now it does have an inconsistency of active versus former. But I'll make a motion to move out favorably for passage if that's what you're looking for.
We have a motion by Senator Tyson. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Reddy. Any discussion on the bill, on the motion? Seeing none. Oh, Senator Ware.
Thank you, and I hate to feel like I need to bring this up, but I think that while many of the former members' spouses probably already have, you know, their licenses, at the point of retirement from the military, many couples, families, individuals shop for where are they going to go when they're done with their military service. And they weigh out what this state offers, what that state offers. And so it may be a lot more people than we're thinking of, and it may be folks that don't already have. And so I'm wondering what the price tag could become then.
Yeah, Senator, we're on the bill without the amendment, so we have that fiscal note in our packet. So, any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, committee. Next, we'll turn our attention to House Bill 2790. And this is moving the professional employer organizations from the Office of Commissioner of Insurance to the Secretary of State. And we can have a quick overview of that, if you would, Charles.
Just stay here. Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, as Madam Chair indicated, this is a bill that pertains to professional employer organizations. They are under a registration regulatory regime, and currently that's under the Commissioner of Insurance. This bill moves that to the Secretary of State effective March 1, 2025. All sections of this bill do go into effect on March 1, 2025, with the exception of a section that that pertains to addressing health insurance, and that health insurance is to be viewed under state law as a single employer health insurance. And then there is also a change with respect to some changes in language that allow assurance organizations to assist PEOs, professional employer organizations, in fulfilling their regulatory requirements. That also goes into effect March 1st, 2025.
Any questions? Oh, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a couple of questions. One, I don't know why March 1st, 2025 was picked, but the fiscal note says that the Secretary of State will not have it implemented until January 1st, 2027. And then the Secretary of State's testimony said that they'll have it implemented when the bill, which is March 1st, 2025. So I think there seems to be some confusion as to when the implementation would occur, even though the statute says March 1st, 2025.
I could be remembering wrong. I thought they were saying that those dates were, they were going to work with those were benchmarks, but I do see we have Eric. Eric, do you care to address that? If you can, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eric Turek with the Kansas Insurance Department, Senator. I won't speak for the Secretary of State's office. From the Insurance Department standpoint, we are ready to hand off that torch, if you will, whenever it is possible. We do want to ensure a smooth transition. I believe that the March 1 date was a date that was added by the reviser, but we are, I will say, with our communication with the Secretary of State's office, we do plan to ensure that whatever date works for them is okay. I think at the latest, they are comfortable with January 1, 2027. I know that we have worked together to establish a September 2026 date.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So that's why I bring this up, is because 2027, but the statute says March 1st, 25. So you would not be complying with statute for almost 2 years. I also have the question on page 8 about the welfare portion being implemented, but I'll leave that one. The dates are probably more important at this point. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Charles, did you have a response?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can just add, since he referenced our office, I can just add a little bit to that. September 27, and I think the other date, or no, is January 27 or September 26. I think, as I mentioned when I reviewed this bill, I think there was a question maybe from one of the committee members, Senator Peck, I believe. So, the issue was, well, is it the March 1 date, accomplishes a couple things. One, it's close enough in time that it can be published. So this isn't a situation where a change in law is in the session laws, not in the statute books or online, and so for an extended period of time. The other thing is that the March 1st date allows the parties, Secretary of State and the Commissioner of Insurance, to come back next session. It gives them plenty of time next session to ask for, to maybe be more clear about how they're going to accomplish this transfer, and also to ask for an extension if they need it. So those are kind of the concerns. I mean, underlying that are questions of, how far out does the legislature feel comfortable in giving authority to the executive branch to accomplish something? And, 26, 27, that's pretty far out. So, especially in, under circumstances where I think initially there was a request for a range of time where this would be accomplished. And so that's a fair amount of discretion for the legislature to extend. So those are some of the issues behind that date, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Any other questions? Senator Peck.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I don't have a question. So are you ready for something else?
Yes. Committee, what is your will on this bill?
Okay, so my will would be for the House and Senate to have a conversation on why March 1st. I'm not convinced it needs to be March 1st at all. I'm not convinced that both sides think it needs to be March 1st at all. So I would like for the House and Senate to have a conversation. Therefore, I'm going to make a motion. I don't have a balloon because it's really simple, that we strike March in all of the places and insert January. So this would mean that the Senate position would be, it would be effective January 1, 2025. Madam Chairman, it seems more than reasonable to me that they would know when this legislation passes. It would then take effect in the statute book in July. If I just, for the life of me, can't figure out why it would take so much time. So if it comes back after conference that March 1 is the accurate date, but I'm not convinced at this point that it is, so I'm going to make a motion to amend and simply put January in place of March in all of these places. And if you wish me to go through and name every one of them, I will, but I think if I can...
Please no. We have a motion by Senator Peck to change the date, second by Senator Schallenberger. Any discussion on the proposed amendment? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I understand what the senator's doing and appreciate it, but my concern is the Secretary of State has said they will not have this implemented before January 1st, 2027. So I maybe we kick the year out too. Just a comment.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all of those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are back on the bill. What is the will of the committee on the bill as amended? Senator Schallenberger. We have a motion to pass it out, seconded by Senator Ware. Any discussion or questions on? Seeing none. Oh, Senator Peck.
So, thank you, Madam Chairman. The motion was not clear. Is it favorably, as amended?
As amended.
Favorably?
Favorably for passage.
Okay. I didn't hear the word favorably.
Yes.
That could mean we just pass it out and it languishes. So I just, that's fine.
We'll make it clear. Favorably as amended and seconded by Senator Ware. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee, that completes our work for today. Thank you. Have a great day. We are adjourned.